Alison, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Alison. I'm a developer advocate over at Weaveworks. I am co-chair of Kubernetes SIG Contributor Experience, and I'm really excited to be here. So, yeah, it's lovely to see all your beautiful faces, and off to Taylor to introduce.
Hey, Taylor.
Howdy, howdy. Howdy, everybody. Really happy to be here today. Happy to see your almost faces. Been really happy to recognize those of you which I could. Thanks for the unique haircuts and colors. Really appreciate it. My name is Taylor Dolezai. I'm a senior developer advocate at HashiCorp. I love talking about all things Kubernetes and ways to make deployments, application delivery, and developer experience that much less effortless and reduce those sharp edges and dark corners.
Well, great. So we were just having a quick chat before we got started, and we were sitting out in the lobby, and we were talking about how over the past 18 months, we've had to up our game a little bit, and we haven't had events really to rely upon. And I'd love to just hear from you all. How have you had to up your game? You know, how have you had to really kind of like take your work to a new level? Why don't we start with you, Alison?
So dealing with the pandemic, it was kind of a big kind of turn for me because at the time, like when things started, I was all the way in New Zealand and I was going to move to the UK, so it was 20 times harder for me to try like coordinate with anyone who's in the Northern Hemisphere. I think the biggest challenge is like with this whole pandemic shift is creating content that's engaging and people will actually like want to watch, because when you're sitting in front of a screen for 8 hours doing like Zoom at home, bring the office to home, you kind of switch off and you don't want to like open a conference thing sometimes and look at a really long talk. You want to get right into it. You want to see something quick and easy that is quick and easy, and yeah.
Yeah, I think you're touching on time span and attention. I mean, when you're cooking and when you have multiple screens, you can jump from one thing to another, and it's very hard to capture the attention of anyone who is there. I think engagement is such an important conversation. Also, how we meet and how we connect with people, right? Because we can tweet, we can exchange some messages over Slack or Discord or any one of the channels that we have today for communication. But how do we really connect with people? Like, should we have like kind of random one-on-one conversation with community? How do we know if we're either building the community that they want and need, right, for their work and for the things that they're doing? So, a lot of questions, not a lot of answers yet.
I'd love to jump in. We've been working on this problem at my company for a while. We haven't figured it out, but I was teaching, traditional instructor-led trainings 5 years ago on Azure and AWS, and sitting there for 5 days, trying to absorb all that material. I could, in teaching it, it was obvious to me this isn't going to scale very far. We need to break up the way that we do training and delivery and learning. And so, over the last 4 or 5 years, we were doing virtual trainings before even the pandemic broke out, just on Zoom. And we started with 12 people in a Slack channel, grew that to over 1,800. And, that's not even, that's like pretty much paying customers. And we're not actually a startup either. We're a self-funded business. And the way that we've done it is to try to make the trainings more modular. So, it's not like sitting and watching a video for 8 hours. You're doing it in a more self-directed way. So you're not relying on steps, but you're actually thinking through the problems on your own. And you've got people to reach out to talk to when that happens. So I think that the biggest challenge in the future is going to be, like, how do we build a culture of, start before you're ready and just get in the game. And socializing the learning, I think, is super important, So you got to celebrate the wins with people, and when you're sitting by yourself watching videos, it's kind of lonely,
Yeah, it really does. Melissa, we were just talking about this before we came in. I'm just curious, you've done this day partly both hybrid, right, and in person. And I know there's challenges that come with that, in particular, because who are you actually catering to? My daughter's a teacher, and she says this is one of the hardest things about her job, is like there's kids in the classroom, but there's also kids who are online, who do you actually talk to?
Yeah, it's really challenging. I've worked in open source for a long time, and so the change to remote didn't affect us in particular. That's how we worked for a long time. But what really changed was how do we kind of scale those interactions, and how do you scale one-to-one interactions? That's really, really difficult to do. And I think for the Data on Kubernetes community, we've tried a lot of different ways to do that within Slack, trying to get interactivity through things like quizzes and so on and so forth, just seeing how can we get people to respond. And like you said, the feedback loop of I'm learning something but also sharing it back. And so we've just tried a lot of different experiments in the past year. Some are good, some are not so good. And as Alex was saying, the Data on Kubernetes Day is in fact happening as we speak right now, and it's a virtual event. So we're in person as a team, but bringing people together from all over the world, some people in person, some people there, and it's a new world. We're trying to figure this out. And what we're trying with that is having conversations on Slack, having them in the YouTube Slack, just wherever people are talking to us, we're trying to reach out and provide that connective tissue for the people who are participating. But it's a challenge. We're still figuring it out.
So Taylor, what are you finding people are wanting to listen to? Like, do they just want the in-depth technical descriptions? Do they want something different? What are you finding?
So I've really seen that people have liked things that aren't the same old, right? You are on meetings all day when it's 4 hours, 8 hours, hopefully not 12 hours on a Zoom call. And that does get really tiring, like what was brought up. And so I've really liked the engagements that people have gotten together to create, one of which I got to be part of was called Cloud Native Kitchen. And it was just a really fun take on how to rethink those types of conversations and presentations. I got to use OPA, the Open Policy Agent, to validate. I built something out with Terraform and GitHub Actions to order a Domino's pizza, make sure there wasn't any ham on my pizza, because that's just unacceptable, right? So it was really fun to kind of put that kind of content together and then share that out with people and just kind of reframe, like instead of going through slides or doing something that's just very de facto, making it different, making it memorable, and making it engaging, like everyone here said. It's just so much more fun when it's that and not the same old.
During this discussion, I'd love to hear from the audience, too, if they have any questions or anything that they'd like to share. I would just like to start posing a question. You don't have to, you don't have to ask it, but just maybe, think of it in terms of what you might ask at a later point in the discussion here today is like, what's worked for you? Like, a lot of you are like working in building out your services, for internal customers or external customers. And so I'm curious what has really worked for you and how have you stayed on top of your game? I'm curious maybe like even for the, the panelists up here, how have you stayed on your own game? How have you like been able to like make sure that you're like on edge and you're like learning and that you're like be able to be that expert that really your employers expect you to be and your community expects? Anyone want to start?
Sure, I'll jump in on that one. What's worked for me and what I've seen work for people in our community is kind of borrowing framework from the medicine field, which is see one, do one, teach one. So it's like you learn, you actually put that into practice with hands-on, and then you teach it back to somebody else, which was kind of alluded to earlier. But that could be kind of intimidating, right, if you're not a public speaker or things like that. And you can feel a little bit of pressure to not fail in front of everybody, but obviously, we need to embrace failure a little bit more. And so what I would say there is what works and what I've seen work is people taking the things that they're learning and building content with it and then distributing that. And the cool part about that is it helps you learn the content even deeper, but then you can use it to build your personal brand, which everybody's trying to, there's so much opportunity in the job market. If you have a decent personal brand, you could go and land a job in an awesome place. So from my perspective, it's that three angles, of absorbing, doing, and then teaching.
I can jump in on that too. I think in terms of how can you find the balance, that's really hard for all of us right now. I think there are ways that you need to find that are personal to you. For me, it's walking around outside, being in nature. That's really helpful. I think for our community, what has been really fun for us is that we have our community manager, Bart, who keeps things really fun. He does a lot of rap videos for our community based on talks that people give. And today we had a musical interlude during the noon break, just to kind of give people that space and that time to absorb and reflect and think. And I think we just have to remember we're all going through this together, and how can we keep it fun?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can add to that as well, it's about some of the values that we're installing in the community, like making sure it's a safe place for people to exchange information and exchange ideas and kind of ask questions as well, because there's no stupid or dumb questions. All questions are welcome and should be answered, and kind of get at least someone trying to answer them. Also, in terms of engaging and interacting, I think the online gives us an amazing opportunity to kind of have a Q&A next to our presentation where we can actually talk and watch the Q&A and kind of try to answer people in real time. I think sometimes when people are joining to either our courses or to watch some of our presentations, they're actually coming and they have very specific questions, very specific problems that they're trying to solve with their customers or in the infrastructure or the code they're writing, and they want to get answers at the moment. And that's what sometimes the Q&A and kind of having the vibrant chat and making sure we are interacting with that chat in real time, not only at the end, can really help ignite those engagements and make it a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more personal, I think, that we sometimes miss in other constellations of events.
So coming around to like making content for cloud native and like reaching out to people, we've been kind of blessed during this pandemic to have amazing tools like Twitter Spaces, where you can just spin one up, put a title in, and people can just jump in. And I think that one thing about Twitter Spaces, I remember like I hadn't tried it for a while, and like a month ago, I joined a Twitter space, and it was the energy there. You could hear like people are discussing questions. It's like being on a real panel like this, but online, and it's so accessible. So, and for another thing with that is, I think when we're making content, we're a bit worried about wanting to make things perfect. We're like looking, I need to have this, perfectly constructed idea, but instead of going for that route, just trying something new and starting kind of small and building upon your skills. So one thing I've been doing is I've been live streaming to my YouTube channel, not last week, but 2 weeks, the week before and the week before that. I've been just doing live streams about like Kubernetes controllers, working on my documentation, heck, even playing Mahjong for fun online. Just to kind of get in the general gist of this is how you do a live stream, this is how you engage with an audience. And then from there, you can kind of build the content and the personal brand you want to have.
How many simultaneous users do you get sometimes?
So like it's only started like a couple weeks ago,
yeah.
And yeah, I'll get like a nice little like handful, like 4 or 5 people.
Right.
And as I get better at doing this, it'll grow. But the best part about it right now is I have the flexibility to try all these different things and find out what works with no expectation. Because when you have a larger audience, there's a bigger expectation on them, from them, because they expect you to do that one thing you're good at. Like, they expect that really polished video that you had last time, right? So, yeah.
Any questions? Yeah.
Question, have any of you witnessed what I call educational burnout? And this is because when the pandemic started, we were all locked down. A lot of my colleagues said, well, there's nothing better to do. We just study and study and study. And then after a while, you realize your whole world is work, study, work, study, work, study. Now we're coming out of this, and I've noticed some of my colleagues are just, wow, at last I can just stop all this.
Anyone want to take that?
I'll jump in there. We have so many people that are just burned out, like in general, just from everything, not let alone the pandemic. One of the things that I've seen working for our people is they'll break out into their own small groups and they'll host Zoom calls together and just talk about the week. So they'll do like a Friday afternoon chat. It might be people they work with or people from our community or whatever. So they kind of go out in small groups and they have somebody to talk to that's, no pressure, just relating to other humans they have something in common with in the industry. And I think we kind of forget to do that sometimes as technologists. We get very focused on writing code and you're by yourself on your computer. But yeah, that really works, socializing with other people. And we need to do that more.
Yeah, like connecting with people outside of the Slack or Zoom or all those spaces. I think it's crucial. Only for you can meet people only to have a conversation about how are you, how things are doing. It doesn't have to be super productive or super efficient or have a very strict agenda. We can just meet people to connect and meet people, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think one of the ways that in the Data on Kubernetes community that we do that, there's an art as code Slack channel, for example, and we just encourage people to just do things that are not work related. We all need this in our lives. We all need that balance, as we talked about before.
I'm just curious, what do you do for your burnout when you're feeling burnt out? What do you do?
Well, I stopped drinking a year ago.
Yeah.
The pandemic, we couldn't go out. I'm from Toronto, Canada.
Yeah.
We couldn't do anything, and so everyone started to have a lot more gear. So I stopped that, and I started Kubernetes about 2 years ago, so it was constant. After that, I think you put the nail on the head to do something totally different. So read about modern art, something, and I find that relaxes you. It's work as well, but it psychologically relieves the. But specifically, I just was getting a lot done educationally, and I was getting really excited about this when the pandemic started.
Yeah.
Can't go out, can't do anything. But what I kind of I underestimated was my ability to keep this going. Even though I'm really interested in that.
Can you get a raise of hands of people who are involved in open source projects right now? That's a pretty good group of people. Any of you who've raised your hands, have you found yourself working more on open source projects since the pandemic started? Raise your hand if you have. Yeah. Would you care to comment, like how your lifestyle, how your life has changed a little bit?
Expanding the amount of hours per day that I'm spending on the computer.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to compensate with stock outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else want to share something? Yeah, I've heard, I remember early in the pandemic when it was just getting, into that routine where everyone was home all the time. There were maintainers who were saying to people, like, they saw them, like, they knew it was like 2 a.m. in Europe, and they were awake, and they were like, they were working on something, and they would just say to them, hey, you got to get some sleep. You got to go, you shouldn't be up doing this right now. They're like, no, but I don't have anything else to do. It's like, yeah, but there's something you can do. You could sleep.
Well, that's kind of the thing, right? The gentleman that made the question or had the question earlier, that reminded me of athletes that would just never stop working out, right? Like, you have to recover at some point.
Yeah.
In fact, recovery makes you stronger.
It's all about the recovery. I mean, you have to take a break, 100%.
I had a comment.
Yeah.
And basically, I work for DataStax as a developer advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, I like in-person conferences, and this might sound a little goofy, but I met you at the hot tub yesterday.
Yeah, we met in the hot tub. Yeah. Yeah. How you doing? Rags, right?
Exactly.
Hey, Rags.
So, it's the energy is something that you can never get on virtual. But I was just talking to a colleague of mine who was saying, I attended a data and Kubernetes workshop. I did a Cassandra Days in New Zealand, and I did something else in Singapore. I think Cassandra Days again, all over the weekend.
Yes.
I mean, that's the positive side of looking at
Yeah.
it, right? And I know you brought up Twitter Spaces, so there are some really cool things, and I don't think this is going away. So I think to expect that we are all going to be in person conferences. I just heard somebody as they were walking by, they said I did 23 shows last year, or the year before. Before the pandemic started. I don't think that's happening anymore, right? So I think we need to kind of adjust, look at the positive, whatever that is. It might be a sliver. I myself, like I said, I'm very old-fashioned, but I'm trying to make that change. We have a complete production system, where people interact, pretty well. We get a lot of questions about, is it going to be a card ad? Is it going to be the usual stuff, right? Which we have put it off to a bot, which answers all those. But again, I think what we need to do as a community is kind of look at the positive and see how we can adjust. It's not going to be perfect, but I think we can do it.
I have a comment there too. I think what you said reminded me of the hallway track and how important that is at different events that we go to. And I think anyone who has been to events, you realize that's where you make a lot of connections. And that's what's been hard to replicate, I think, with the digital stuff, is how do we help facilitate those connections as community managers. And I think a lot of us turn to Slack to do some of that. That's helped somewhat on Twitter, but it is difficult. It's not quite the same. It's us kind of manually going in and saying, hey, you like this thing and you like this thing, let's put you two together. But we are trying to facilitate that. It's just, it is the thing that we miss the most is the hallway tracks at these events.
Yeah, there.
I want to echo the comment from Rex. Yeah, I run the San Francisco ClickHouse meetup. It's a popular data warehouse. And when we went remote, it went international. So we now have people, so there's these synergy, these sort of synergies that you get from meeting other people. It's just we're meeting them online and they're coming from India, they're China, Eastern Europe. We now run it, we used to run it in the evenings, and it was, obviously an in-person event because that's how meetups ran. Now it runs at noon. I don't know if we're going to change it. It's just, I think we may have to change the name. It's no longer the San Francisco meetup. It is just a meetup, and we have people from all over the world. It's been really cool.
I
That's
actually
really
have a
neat.
question to that. It's
Yeah.
super interesting because I've seen it also in other places when trying to accommodate as many time zones as possible. How do you see the engagement and kind of the way people ask questions and interact and within your community?
They're pretty talkative.
That's awesome.
It's, and this thing about people working too much during COVID, they were doing that before.
Yeah.
These are people who are just really obsessed with technology.
Yeah.
So we have great meetups. We usually run them. I have to chop them off after 2 hours. People need to go back and get some of the work done. But what we did do, I think the big accommodation we did was we moved it to noon Pacific time. Because that allows people, our technology
Right.
is coming from Eastern Europe. That allows them to come in, and then we get these people from India. I don't know how they do it, but they get up in the middle of the night and do their pods.
Wow.
It's actually worked pretty well.
That's really amazing.
So what we do is most of the the usual conversation happens on Slack, but some of the more technical questions, some of those people who are repeat attendees, right? They go to Discord and kind of have a more advanced chat because they're on the the beginner stuff, they don't care. So we kind of they kind of filter themselves that way. We don't expect anybody to go anywhere. We just monitor both those chats and try to answer as many questions as we can. And a lot of times the attendees themselves answer, which is cool.
One thing I'll tack onto this is that we did do Q&A calls for a long time in our community. We do have a global audience as well, so time zones are always tricky. Still trying to figure that out, maybe have multiple calls, but our community is different. We don't get as many questions because the people are learning from scratch and they're brand new. Sometimes they come in and they're not sure what to ask. So I've found that for that type of audience, to come in with a quick 5-minute lesson to get the conversation going, and then the questions will start to come out. When we first started, I'd just get on the call and I'd be like, all right, who's got questions? And it's like crickets. And then like, all right, call's over. So once I changed it to start with a 5-minute lesson, got everybody warmed up, and then the questions started coming out. And I think you could do that anywhere. You could do that at work. You could do that in your meetup. That's a winning pattern from what I've seen.
We do pancake breakfast at events, and we have some this week, so we had to try to do the pancakes virtually. And so we'd pass the pancakes between frames on the screen. It wasn't quite the same, but it was still fun. I think the fun part is critical, because people want to relax and they want to enjoy themselves. I'm curious too, though, what tools have you started to really adopt outside of Zoom? Because we've all used Zoom, but are there tools that you've begun to adopt, Taylor?
Yeah, I think that it's been interesting because Zoom is so accessible. Being able to just spin one up and jump on it for people to start up live streams and such. That's quite easy. I think that's something I know that we're looking at right now is what's something that kind of works for the team, works for everyone. And but it's been interesting to learn things about OBS and finding out what kinds of technology platforms and frameworks are out there to make things easier. One thing that we did as well, we developed a tool in-house called Picasso. All of you were talking about fine art. It was on somebody else's brain as well. to kind of help with making speaker cards and other things, and using HCL, because I work at HashiCorp. And so that's been something that's really helped us out as well, figuring out what things to automate as well so that we can focus on that content and focus on those interactions.
Didn't you create your own online event platform? Or
Yeah. For HashiCorp or HashiComph, we have our own platform that we developed, and so we get comments, and we're able to stream things and keep tracks in line. So it's been really interesting. It's been great to have, easy to moderate for us, and then really fun to use when it comes to sourcing questions.
Could you repeat the name of that tool? I'm sorry to interrupt. Picasso, is that what it was, or Picasso?
Yeah, Picasso. I believe it's public. I can share that out afterwards. It's under my colleague's organization. So under his name,
very
Eric
cool.
Veld.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
how about some other tools? How about yourself?
So,
Twitter Spaces, you said.
Twitter Spaces, but another tool I'd like to touch on is I heard Discord in the back, and I was like, yo, Discord is amazing. Like, I'll say one thing with Discord is last year, instead of having an online contributor summit, like we do have an in-person contributor summit, we did a thing called the Contributor Celebration, and we had things like a giant bake-off that was streamed live to YouTube, and we had DevOps party games, and you can. There's a talk that I did about this, keeping communities together, in a virtual world. Back in KubeCon EU earlier this year. And I think the thing with Discord is that there are so many ways to engage with it. You can use voice, you can use text, and it's about providing those paths so that people can communicate and interact in a way that's kind of best for them. Because not everyone's comfortable with going on a Zoom, not everyone wants to speak, and some people want to interact at their own pace. So text,
So with your DevOps party game, are there different versions of it? Does it come in Git?
So DevOps Party Games was not, it's hosted by Matt Stratton, and we had him bring the show to this contributor celebration. It was really fun.
I was trying to make a joke. It didn't really work.
It's a bit hot up here, I will say, because these lights are like the sun. We've got 4 LA suns pointing at us here.
Can I add to the tools?
Yeah.
The ones that we have kind of made a I don't know what to call it, a standard or whatever you want to call it. We want developers to be able to start the workshops without any prerequisites. They don't need to install anything. And one of the cool tools is Git Pod, right?
Yeah.
If you haven't used it, it's just wonderful, right? So it just brings up Visual Studio. You have a terminal, and it's all online. Whether you like it or not, there are a lot of people using Windows, and for them, it's just not acceptable to give them Linux commands and say, okay, go try that, right? So at least make it easier that way. And there are a couple of things like that we have standardized. We've said no way, developers are going to put their credit cards, right? So we strive for providing a free tier. Astra, we have a free tier that developers really love. And just for the data and Kubernetes workshop, we worked with Civo, and they provided with the Kubernetes cluster that you can essentially install Cassandra on it. So we have kind of some of those tools that make it a lot easier, seamless, and easy for developers to use.
I'll just chime in here. I love Git Pod. I started using it only a couple weeks ago, and it's just so good, especially doing workshops, because everyone's going to have the same environment. Everyone can get started straight away, and it just makes coding so much more accessible. I use it on my iPad. I plug in a keyboard, and I can do web development documentation in the middle of a coffee shop. My bank has gone from 5 kgs to 3.8 because I don't have to carry around a MacBook to do things. That's amazing.
There's a couple that I'll mention too, going back to the interactivity with your community. I think you might be familiar with the Hopin or Bevy platforms. They're kind of similar. And I think for us, the way I'm also an Apache Cassandra contributor, and we held an event earlier this year, and we used it to bring people on stage to talk about what their experience with Cassandra. So kind of bringing people back and putting them in the spotlight too. It's not just about us one-way communicating, but having that interactivity. And another one that we've used is a quiz. We brought quizzes into our events, as I mentioned before, and that's a way to get people to, it's just, some of them are just fun. They're not like, if you get this wrong, you get an F on your paper. It's just for fun. But we use a couple tools. There's one called Kahoot and one called Menti that I know that we've used for Cassandra before, and they work really well. And then finally, just for community, just kind of getting to know your community, we use one called Orbit that's been around, not long ago it came out. And it's a way to see who's in your community, who's active, and kind of who's up and coming, and it gives us an opportunity to reach out to those people and connect one-on-one.
Yeah,
I've
I
got
think that
one quick tool that's not that high tech, but definitely recommend if it's hard to kind of be online and be looking out and not getting that feedback by seeing people's faces. I've got a digital frame of my dog and some of my loved ones behind my computer screen, so that's worked pretty well too.
That's definitely a personal touch. It's important. One of the things we added, I think it was based on blockchain technology, where people are doing quizzes. We're actually introducing virtual swags to people that just scan a barcode and they get some blockchain-based badge that people really like because they start putting it in different places. Not before NFT became a thing, but we definitely seen a lot of engagement, a lot of excitement around that. So virtual swag is definitely a topic that people enjoy using, and also something that we can distribute relatively easy.
So just listening, I would love to just get any shout outs from the audience about tools been mentioned or you haven't heard. Any tools people are, in the back?
Yeah. People online were not hearing what we had to say.
Oh, that's a very good point. Hey everybody, I work at GitHub, so very much all open source everything. CodeSpace is similar to Git Pods. You can spin it up. It's also public on your GitHub repository, so that's something you could use today. Across the board, discussions for open source communities has been really popular. It's kind of like a Stack Overflow plus a couple other things all within the GitHub environment, which makes it easier because a lot of open source projects already sit there. So I think those are two tools that kind of just came out over the last year that have popped up. And to the earlier discussion on how many people start contributing to open source a lot more, we actually did a research project, which was really cool. GitHub kind of conglomerates the state of the Octoverse every year at the big conference that we have. And every year they come up with different types of community statistics that they find. And over the last year, they did 2020 stats, and they saw the increase, so much more increase in open source contributions, and people were more excited about it rather than doing their actual work because they just felt burnt out from their actual work. So I thought that was really, really interesting, and that's something that, I don't know, it makes sense when you hear it, when you talk about it, but just seeing it on the platform and seeing the stats from the research team was pretty amazing.
And thanks for the GitHub mobile app too. That's been a huge help, by the way. So kudos.
Was there someone else, I think, who was going to, right there in the middle? Yeah.
So not really a recommendation for a tool, but I guess maybe a question around tools and process. So I mean, maybe a brief mention that there's no shortage of tools and platforms. In fact, I sort of wonder about the processing overhead and memory pressure on my laptop from running so many different collaborative tools simultaneously. But that aside, my own reflection is in the last year and a half, I've had these tools and made use of them to retain connections and have ongoing conversations with people I already know. Where the question is, where have you seen success, or maybe what tools are available, what processes can be engaged to create kind of the serendipitous connection? You talked about the hallway track earlier. The people you confront in the hallway that you would never otherwise maybe not think to have a discussion with. And that's the thing that I've personally been missing over the last year and a half is the conversation I never had because I never had the opportunity. The person I didn't know, or maybe I was shy or whatever it is about engaging. Do you have an approach to that? Have you solved that problem? Are these still, is this an area in the tooling that maybe is an as of yet unsolved problem?
So the maintaining connections, keeping track of who you already know, and just making sure you keep a line open, and you are like reaching out to those people. So this kind of comes into the area of having your own kind of personal CRM. And I know, I don't know of any specific tools, but I know of a tool called Notion, which has helped me a lot with notes, and it has really good templates for managing these kind of things. But I would definitely go Google around it, personal CRMs. Maybe other panelists know of some tools as well.
I just use LinkedIn. That's it. So everybody that I'm connected with on there, I know who they are, and I interact with them on there. Twitter is also a big one. To me, that's the easiest way to do it. So social media is right there. So that's also one that might be underestimated a little bit. Because it is something that it gets a little chatty. Sometimes it can steal your energy, it seems like. But I think that it's, if you've been resisting it, jump in. Because I know so many people that were like, I'm not going to go on there, and then once they got in, they're like, the community is great. So
even when you have like so many connections already, like where like you have the social media, having that personal CRM or something to manage that helps you make sure you're engaging with that large audience or like specific key contacts on a basis so that you don't lose touch. Yeah. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can jump on that, it's a very good tool to manage the connections. But if you want to expand those connections, ask for 3 different introductions. Just work with the community managers that you're part of their community, and then they know you, and say, hey, I want to learn, or I want to know, or I'm looking to engage with someone who works at such and such company or works in such and such workloads. Who are the 3 people you recommend me to meet or talk with, and maybe you can help with an introduction. I think you would be amazed at how many people are willing to meet for online random conversations about almost anything related to their work or technology or those kind of things.
+1, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, I'm pretty boring. I use Evernote and really like the to-do features that they have now, so I can keep up to date with people. See how the new hobby is coming, their pizza or their pizza dough, or their knitting or whatever it might be. But has just really helped me, just getting it out of my brain and into something digital that I can mostly rely on. This is a storage event, right? So that's really helpful.
Does anyone know the personal CRM that's something research? Does anyone know that one? I'm trying to remember the name right now. I've used it before and it was really helpful. It allows you to hyperlink in it, but back to internally into your what you've already written before, so you can create categories and topics. But any tools out there that we haven't mentioned that anyone would like to tell us about in the audience?
I think one of the tools you didn't mention is Catacuda. Yeah, it's one of the tools. Like I'm working with that for Riley as part of the course that I'm doing for them. It was a blast. Some of the integrations can be challenging from an engineering and ops perspective, but some of them are super easy and fast, and it enables everyone who participates to have an environment right there in their browser. So I think it's great.
So I would love to shift. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, one that I don't think has been emphasized enough is YouTube live streaming.
Yeah.
We use that for our events. It's wonderful, and I think what's really great about it is that it's like really low key. You just publish the link, and people can just drop in, listen for a while, and then disappear again. And I think the reason that's good is because a lot of people won't participate if they have to go through a lot of hoops.
Right.
And so this has low activation energy.
Yeah, we use Restream, then we publish to YouTube. And I know that some people have used Zoom, published to YouTube, and then they've used Discord, but then there's confusion about where do you actually do your chat. And so, so people will be have to told, oh, please put your comments into, into Discord. And I think it gets, sometimes you really got to be careful about that because synchronous and asynchronous communication is great. So live stream, I used to use a wiki. So I'd have a live stream with a wiki. And then this was back in the day, then we had an IRC, right? So that allowed you to talk in the moment, listen to the live stream, and then then you could cultivate the wiki, right? So you could then get the information right there. I would love to see more of that. I think that's actually an effective way to kind of get the community involved in it, to start collaborating. But go ahead, I know that you passed the mic to the person next to you.
Well, that was his question. YouTube live streaming.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'll echo Alex, we've used Restream as well.
Yeah.
Restream is a really awesome live streaming tool. It makes it easy. OBS, can be intimidating for some people. The thing I liked about Restream was the multiple destinations you can stream to very simply, and then also bringing up the comments on the screen does really help the engagement a lot. People like to have their question up there, so it helps.
Another tool that we haven't also touched on is a thing called Streamyard. Now, I see you in the ground. You're like, yo. Streamyard lets you bring a Zoom call. Well, it brings up a video conference inside your browser that can then be live streamed directly to YouTube and recorded. It's really good. If you've got like a bunch of people you need to get on a panel in a video, because I found like when you try to use a tool like OBS and then like stream the Zoom, it can get chaotic. Your computer just starts going, because there's just so much going on.
I would love to share this conversation because I did think it is related. At the News Stack, we're always kind of thinking about, we describe it as editorial operations, and you have to start thinking a lot about this kind of work because you're doing so many things. So, for us, for instance, it might be that we do a podcast, but there also has to be a blog post associated with the podcast. There has to be an editing team, for the podcast itself. There has to be coordination, for the guests and everything else. Are you finding your teams changing at all? Are you finding that the people who you're working with need to have skill sets that they, that are important to kind of, making sure this operation works? And because it can go haywire pretty quick.
I think that's a really good point. I definitely see that landscape changing for a lot of people, and the people that we hire, that kind of changing too. It's really important to have, and even idea and strategy development on that front. So if you have people asking you questions, how do I do A, find out how to speak to them in each of those mediums, and then, how to work with one another so that we can produce a podcast, that we can create a blog post, have code up on GitHub, and kind of work within those different mediums. That is incredibly important, and we're seeing tons of that now. You can't just jump on a live stream, get 4,000 views or however you measure your success and just call it a day. You have to find out different ways to scale that and interact with people in each of those mediums.
Yeah, we find ourselves skilling up on those things. So not expanding our team necessarily, but our team is learning about how to use all these different tools well together.
Right.
So I had a good chat with a buddy of mine, and he was like, Devrel has kind of changed to this space where, there's now a thing called full stack Devrel, where it's like, you have to be a, full-on video production writer, you have to be a game developer. Like, there's this whole stack of things that you can go into, and that's because we're engaging people in different ways. Like, we didn't have in person till 2 years now. During that 2 years since we last kind of met in person like this, we've had to adapt and overcome and build new mediums, like new content to engage, new types of content to engage with people. That's my comment.
Yeah, the point made about multiple types of content, audio, video, text, is spot on in my experience. We've been challenged by a lot of our community members, like, hey, can we get that in text format when it was in video and so on? So we've had to build standard operating procedures for that to give off to the team members. And the hard part is, when you don't do that and you lose somebody critical, the next person comes in and you got to teach them everything from scratch, and they have no idea what's going on in this chaos. The content production pipeline for a Devrel, or even just anybody that's putting content out, is pretty legit at this point. So yeah, for me, standard operating procedures is just that dumbs it down, basically. Here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very well documented. That way, if you lose somebody on the team, you could just plug somebody else right in there.
Actually, one of the areas we're looking into in the data engineers community is how can we enable everyone to kind of have a conversation? Because we notice sometimes there's silos of different conversations on different channels, but we want people to kind of exchange beyond those channels and meet. And one of the things we're facing is we're doing it as a volunteering work, right? So all of us has a full-time job beyond that community. How do we make it? How do we sustain it? Who are the people that are going to help us sustain that? And what is the cadence that we're going to run kind of those networking events? And one of the things we're looking into is actually having breakout rooms. So we're bringing people in, we have kind of an agenda, we have a topic of conversation that's related to the world of either EDLs, building pipelines, and all those data engineering aspects. And then we're splitting them into different rooms, hoping that they don't know each other yet, and now they're starting to actually connect and exchange perspectives and knowledge. But like I mentioned, how do we make it so it's easy for us to operate? And this is a lot about the process that we can build in to make it easy for people to support and add more volunteers to the community.
I was going to ask, there were people who mentioned that they're part of open source communities. Have you had to up your skill levels at all? Anyone out there would care to comment about or how they've seen their community need to up their skill levels by doing workshops or helping out their community improve so they can retain and build upon what's been developed?
Yeah, I think figuring out Administrivia, honestly, has been one of the big things that we've seen, people, the right tagging of issues. I know with Kubernetes we have Prow, and that's incredibly helpful in kind of categorizing that and figuring out who needs to act on or talk to an issue. So those immediately come to mind.
I'd like to, we've been up here for a while, but I would like to just finish off and kind of looking forward a little bit. And one of the things that I saw early on in the pandemic was Animal Crossing was used for a conference. And actually, I think it was pretty popular. And it made me think, gosh, would that be a way to help kind of release some of the stress that comes with participating in online events where it's both kind of like you're just so standard and so rote, where you're just sitting in front of a camera and you have your mic on. Whereas if you were just an animated character, you can interact in different kinds of ways.
See, that's the thing. We've seen like VTubers take off. I've tried doing VTubing. It was pretty good, not gonna lie. If you look at there might be some videos online of it while I was at a KubeCon where I just put on like a full-on avatar. And that kind of thing, it's fun. It gets people going. And on top of that, like, I really want to see someone do a conference in VR chat where we've got all the speakers get like sent out like a VR headset and all that. And there's another person who gets sent out the VR headset AV team to kind of stream that live. And so you've got like, people turning up as like Kirby, like, from like a Nintendo game next to like, some anime person to, a cat.
A whale.
Like, a whale, like someone talked about Docker.
Yeah, shark.
Like
a cow.
Shark. Yes. Like
a cow shark.
See that kind of thing. Like we want to make content that's fun and engaging. Like I want to like get a green screen up and I want to jump inside my terminal and be like right there.
That's it.
We're gonna type that. I want to be in the ID and be like, look at that. There is a guy on YouTube called Randy who does game dev videos, and he is so good with the editing that it's like it's an emotional but entertaining, fun journey to go on. And yeah.
I want it now. I want it now. I want to go there.
I want to do that.
Yeah. Who else wants to go? Raise your hand if you'd like to do that. Oh, okay. Well, good. That's even better. Cosplay. Now we're talking. Maybe there should be a cosplay KubeCon.
Yeah, I don't want to.
That would be probably a little
much.
It was cool.
Just because con.
I think the virtual reality's better. I don't know about the cosplay thing.
Touching on virtual reality, I think I don't remember which conference that was, but one of the Microsoft online conferences had virtual reality baked into it. It was pretty awesome. I didn't have, the proper tools to enjoy and immerse in that experience, but, hey, we can do other things than just having a stage now.
I remember that. They were way ahead of their time. That was in like 2002, Second Life.
Yeah, you can tell like, someone's age. Judy and I, who was here in the front row. We went to the museum to do VR. I mean, that just kind of like shows you. I mean, it's so new though, you know. But that did give me a really an experience of what that world's like. It's totally awesome. I mean, like, have you seen? Do you do coding in this too? I mean, are there like code? Like,
I haven't tried I haven't done like a live VTuber debut yet of a VTuber who does coding, but this is something that we're probably going to try out soon.
Do you promise to do it?
I will do it. I will post about it on Twitter. You need to follow me, and we're going to do something cool.
There we go.
I'm excited for this, you know. And this is what I love the most about like being in person and being able to chat with like-minded people is new ideas come up.
That's
You're
right.
Like, yo, let's do that.
I mean, there's a whole data story here too, isn't there, Caston? There has to be a whole data story here. Somewhere. Anyway, this has been so much fun. I want to thank everyone for participating. And the audience, thank you so much for engaging in this conversation. I really had a great time.